Welcome to the Savvy Dentist podcast with Dr. Jesse Green, the show where great dentistry meets great business. Listen in each week as we bring you an inspiring person who will share their story, ideas and business techniques to help you create a practice and a life you love. And now introducing your host, Dr. Jesse Green.
Hey everyone, it's Jesse Green here. Welcome back to SavvyDentist.com and to the Savvy Dentist podcast. It's really terrific to have your company for another episode of the show. Now, this show forms part of our summer series, and during the summer series, what we're doing is we're going back into the archives, rummaging through the vault, finding the best bits of the best episodes, and we're taking those vignettes and those snippets and we're combining them together to form one single episode around a particular theme or topic. And the topic for this episode is creating great business systems. Now, every business on the planet needs great systems, and dental practices are no exception. But what does great systems mean? Well, most people have their systems documented, sitting up in a folder somewhere on a bookshelf gathering dust, and no one ever follows them. So for us, great systemization involves not just documenting the systems, but having those systems followed by all. And what's really important to understand is what systems should be documented. There is such a thing as over-systemization. So we need to understand we've got to document the core systems of the practice and the core things that move the needle from a commercial point of view. And when you get this right, what's going to happen is your patients are going to have the most amazing experience at your practice. They're going to have the best possible clinical care, they're going to receive the best possible customer service, and they're going to be raving fans about your practice. Now, on top of that, when you have new team members, you're going to be able to onboard them faster, better, and more easily, because the systems that you have allow them to go from being inexperienced rookies to being competent professionals really, really quickly. And what's more, great systems form part of the intellectual property assets of your practice so that you have value creation as you build these systems as well. It creates value in the asset itself. And that's, again, really, really important. Now, we hear from a huge number of guests in this particular episode, some absolute legends. You're going to hear from people like Verne Harnish, the author of Scaling Up. You're going to hear from Dr. Glen, who is the founder of Greencross Vets, one of the sharks on Shark Tank. You're going to hear from people like Jenyns, who wrote the book Systemology, and a whole lot more. And in this episode, there's tons and tons of pearls of wisdom that they share. Lots of gold nuggets. So please, as always, do have a pen and paper handy to capture these insights, to capture these ideas. But most importantly, it's critical that you act on these ideas and you act on these insights, because if you can do that, then your practice is going to really thrive, it's going to really flourish, and you're going to have patient experiences rocketing. You're going to have team members becoming more productive than ever before. Your life is going to get simpler, easier, and better because you have great systems in your practice. So I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I enjoyed bringing it to you. So without any further ado, here's the summer series episode on creating great business systems. Verne, I just wanted to talk for a moment about your book Scaling Up, because I have a copy in front of me here. In fact, I've got a couple of copies on my bookshelves. But one of the things that's really intrigued me about the title of the book, it's the tagline or the subtitle. And the subtitle is How a Few Companies Make It and Why the Rest Don't. So I wanted to ask, why is it that the few make it and the rest don't? What separates those that do and don't make it?
Well, that is the essence of the book. And we said, you've got to nail 4 big decisions. You've got to get the people right. And you hire the right people, your life is easy. You hire the wrong people, your life is miserable and expensive. It's like not complicated. And then your customers are either happy or not happy, your patients in your case. Number 2, you've got to nail strategy. Are you doing things that actually are highly profitable? In terms of the focus of the practice, the particular customers you go after. And I think most important, if you can get the practice to a point where you're able to say no more than yes, because you get more particular with who it is you want to serve and the services that you're really best at. Then obviously it comes down to number 3, execution. You can sit around and talk about this stuff, but if you can't answer the phones on time and get people seen on time and make sure the treatment's pain-free, and some of those fundamentals, it's going to be tough. And it comes down to just some basic routines of communication that's easy to break down. Just being married, the challenges with communication, let alone you get 10, 20, 30 staff members. And then last, we just got spending some time on cash. You get by with decent people, decent strategy, decent execution, but not a day without cash. And it's not that you're not going to make payroll. I don't think that's really necessarily an issue with most professionals. But do you have the cash to take advantage of opportunities like a location that's come up that you might be able to grab, or a practice that you're able to purchase, or even that equipment that allows you to take the practice to the next level, if it includes, IT, that's so critical in being able to automate a lot of the stuff that was manual. So that takes cash. It takes money to make money. And so people, strategy, execution, and cash. But the biggie is really internal. It's this thing called ego. If you think you know it all, that's the beginning of the end. I'll tell a quick story of Mark Cuban, who is one of the Shark Tank judges, like Naomi Simpson and Glenn Richardson are there in Australia, who, by the way, are both, avid users of Scaling Up and fans of ours. Mark is this iconic, same in the U.S. and owns all these sports teams. And I've known Mark for 30 years. And we asked, one of our audience members asked him a question, what's the biggest mistake you've made and what did you learn from it? And that's kind of a, typical question. And he gave a typical initial answer, which is, hey, I've made a lot of mistakes, which is what you do if you're going to be successful. But then he said something very insightful. But he said there's a fact pattern that behind almost every one of my mistakes, I thought I was the smartest person in the room. And that's when it gets you in trouble. And that's one of our first lessons around people. Your job as a leader is to have no answers. Your job's to get the right question and then find a smarter who. So if I can, I'll give you an example. We just had a bunch of money embezzled from us. This internet scam stuff is real. And about 150,000 of it was shipped to Hong Kong. Well, long story short, the police called us last week and said, hey, the funds are frozen. They've got it. They found it because guy had also defrauded somebody else, another victim. What I've got to do is get a lawyer. So I'm getting ready to say, all right, I'm going to reach out and find a lawyer. Wait a second, who do I know in Hong Kong that's infinitely smarter than me, knows what's going on there? I knew a guy who runs a significant company, got a hold of me, said, Verne, I'm on it. I'm going to get my CFO. And so the CFO, and we got all these kind of crazy quotes from lawyers about what it would take to recover it. And Derek went over on his own, CFO of a major company, to the police department, talked to him himself, which was fantastic in way of representing us. And was it because he lives in Hong Kong, was able to ascertain much better information from that police officer and what's going on with the case, and then ultimately deal with the lawyers we're going to have to deal with than me. And it's always a who question, as Jim Collins says. So I don't care what decision you've got to make, don't make it alone. And that's, I think, one of the lessons.
But sometimes I see practices with either no systems or systems that are written and documented that no one follows. Mm-hmm. Do you see that as well?
All the time. And that's why I say to people, when you're creating processes for your business, and it starts a business model, and then it goes down to actual specific small things. They have papers and papers and documents and documents. No one even knows where to find them, let alone read them. And the thing that I hear from team members and staff when I'm working with business owners who have a team working for them, if I take the business owner out of the room and I talk to the staff, they say the same thing over and over again. We're too busy with our everyday work to stop and look these processes up, which is super ironic, because if they were following the processes, they wouldn't be so flat out busy, because the systems and the process would take care of themselves pretty much with just a little action here and there. Things would be smoother, but they don't have time to stop and find them or stop and follow them because they're too busy reacting to things that are happening. And I can't blame them for that. They've got people right in front of them, or they're short on time, or someone's called in sick and they're trying to juggle. So it really becomes a staff issue, like a staff morale issue, and a customer experience issue that affects the business as a whole, because the systems and processes aren't being followed as a result of those issues. It's like a wheel, a hamster wheel that you never really get off if you don't take the time to stop and focus on it.
So I guess that's the question.
is, how do you kind of get that pattern interrupt to say, hey, if we keep going like this, we're just going to be, peddling without getting further. And one of the challenges that, I hear, I'm sure you hear is, but if I take time out, I'm either A, too busy, or B, it's going to cost me lost revenue, and so on and so forth. And I mean, I think we both would probably agree that any lost revenue is not really lost revenue because they're going to gain a whole lot more back. But to someone listening to this, what would you say to them if they're experiencing those thoughts?
Oh, that's such a good point, because people do stress out like that. The pattern that I normally follow with people is say to them, okay, if you're already providing a really good experience with your customers, let's look at your pricing first. Can you raise your pricing just a little so that you have less people to serve, so that you can build buffer time into your staff day or your week to look at these sorts of things? Because a lot of the times I think business owners are competing on price, right? I need to just undercut my competitors a little bit so that I can get new customers in. But you're trying to cram so many people in so that you can make the same amount of money, and then that's when you have no time. That's when you have no time for improvement. When I say to people, just up your prices a little bit, trust me, if you're giving a good experience, your practice is going to feel better for them anyway. So they're still going to come back. They don't. As a loyal customer, I don't even know what my dentists charge me at the moment. I will happily pay whatever they do, because when I go there, the practice is, and it's an inviting environment and people aren't stressed out and rushing around. I've never thought I'd say this about dental before. I love being there. The waiting room is lovely. The experience in the chair is lovely. My dentist takes the time to walk me through what's happening now, but then also look at, okay, so in the future, we might be looking at this next or this next. The experience is better. So I will pay anything for that, because it's the outcome I'm getting. That's the important thing, not exactly what they're working on my tooth. So from a customer experience point of view, if you're raising your prices and it's a good experience, no one's going to mind, right? Less customers, more buffer time. You can schedule in time then to look at your processes and systems. So it's as easy as that first step. It is one that takes guts to do it.
Yep.
Because taking the leap to raise your prices, because you think that's got nothing to do with productivity, raising prices, but actually it's that flow-on effect that makes a difference. But people freeze at that moment. I don't want to raise my prices because no one will come back. It's not actually the case. Just give it a go, raise it a little, and then schedule in regular pricing reviews so that it never feels like a big deal anymore. That itself should be a process. Every 6 months or every year, we sit down and we look at our pricing options and the customer experience we're giving, and we tweak it that way. And that takes the pressure off too.
Raising your prices, I think, is a really important strategy to do, as you say, every 6 months or every 12 months or whatever frequency. There is some anxiety that comes up when people go through that. If you're constantly trying to undercut the competition, there's only one direction that you're going to go, because then they're going to try and undercut you, and then we're in a race to the bottom. There's that old joke, I'm sure you've heard it, like the barber that does $20 haircuts, and the guy across the road says we do $15 haircuts, and he does $10 haircuts, and then the other guy responds with $5 haircuts, and eventually he just says we fix $5 haircuts.
Yeah, I love that one.
Yeah, it's an oldie, but I guess the thing is that when you're in that race to the bottom, or when you're constantly trying to compete on price, it is a bit of a race you don't want to win. And I think there's some anxiety in the dental marketplace, particularly about positioning their fee structure at a particular level, particularly at the moment, with the cost of inflation and all those other cost of goods going up and inflation and so on. But to your point, no one notices it. We raise our prices routinely in our practice. No one notices it. And there's a lot of price elasticity there, particularly if you've got a relationship with the patient. And I think that's your point, is because your relationship with your dentist is so strong, you're not there because of the price. You're there because of the relationship. Is that a reasonable assertion?
Absolutely. I'm there because of how they make me feel and the pressure that they take off my life admin of my dentistry needs, my dental needs, and that of my kids. So we go to a practice that specializes and markets. Their marketing talks about how people are scared to go to the dentist due to traumatic experiences as children, and that they work with children to make them extra comfortable. Their marketing is full of kids saying, I used to be scared, I'm not anymore. That's what brought us to them in the first place. And the fact that the experience matched, that they said that in their marketing, and it really was a comfortable, pleasant experience, completely the opposite to what we were expecting. That straight away, I knew we would always go there. I was a loyal customer straight away. They could double their price and I would find a way to pay it because the experience of taking my kids there, so smooth for me.
Where was that inflection point, or where was that tipping point? And you thought, we're kind of at this stage of we either have to continue to grow or we either just stay put. What was that point for you?
The number one thing we do as business owners is find and finding great clinicians and growing and attracting really good people into Townsville, and regional cities are damn hard to find when you don't have at the time we didn't have a vet school in Townsville, but finding great vets was the number one thing I was doing. I was great at the recruitment. I'm flying into Townsville for 3 days. Anyone who's looking at working for me in Townsville, we'd bring them in for 3 days, meet the team. The rest of the team knew part of their job was to show how positive our culture was. And we had such a fun time. As a small team, 40, 50, 60 people, we're having a fun time, great vibe, meetings, sharing ideas, supporting each other clinically. And then Innisfail got hit, I'm trying to think of the year, it must have been 2004, 2005 perhaps, got hit by a cyclone, knocked out Innisfail, pretty much shut the town down. Cyclone Yasi.
Oh, I remember Yasi, yeah.
Yeah, Cyclone Yasi. And I thought to myself at the time that if that had hit Townsville, we wouldn't have had a business for quite some time. You all got business interruption insurance, but at the same time, it would have shut us down for quite a chunky period of time. And I thought, who was going to come along and buy my veterinary practices in Townsville from me? And I worked out there was no one in Australia at that time that had the financial capability or the emotional intelligence of understanding professional people to do it. So we decided to form a co-op with some guys in Brisbane, and we started doing some back-end services. And then about 2006, a couple of guys turned up and they were trying to do a roll-up in the veterinary space. And the key to me was I will support these guys and help them do it, or become a key player in it, on the basis that I can't see anyone else growing up to buy practices in Townsville. So that was when Cyclone Yasi hit, I realised I had to be part of creating the succession plan for the veterinary industry, and I didn't want some money guys playing in my profession and doing it badly. So the guys in Brisbane, who are great, wonderful people that have been in the veterinary industry for years, John Oldham and Keith Knight and myself teamed up, and we evolved, I guess, what we thought was a great succession plan for the veterinary profession at the time, and that was why we had to do the public listing, was come up with some money to help settle a whole bunch of practices that had been optioned up and rolled in, and we rolled all our practices into that first foundation group. So there were 32 clinics in 2007 that rolled together.
Yep.
But pre the corporate public listing, we had 17 clinics in a cooperation. So we all stayed independent business owners, but we formed a little company called United Veterinary Management to provide back-end services, marketing, payroll, financial, KPIs, all those back-end things. And we had a break-even services company to provide those services to us as business owners. A buying group was in there, and that was the platform that we used when we eventually pulled everything together and rolled it into one ownership model under a public listing.
Fantastic. That's really interesting about the co-op. I wasn't aware of the co-op. I think that's a really interesting model. And so, as I understand, you've got United Veterinary Services. Basically, you've got the individual practices operating independently. You've then got this central body saying, hey, we'll provide HR support, payroll support, marketing support, and you've therefore centralised that back office functionality.
Correct. And IT, managing, computers. So we're starting to grow that up. And the next level that we went to was simply let's go and find some money. In the public listing, we had offers from private equity as well as the public listing, and we thought we stayed more in control of the agenda as a public company, because we then control the board, and we could then evolve that corporate office to main function and only function was to support our frontline clinicians. And so, present day, healthier is evolved the same way. Healthier is only relevant, the corporate team are only relevant if the frontline clinicians are getting what they need, the support they need to be the best they can be as clinicians. And so that's the model we play with at Healthier now. That's the model we evolved at Greencross, that we're a franchise-like. We still needed driven clinicians in the front line of our organisation, engaging with the local community, supporting their team, the leading vets with a team that they'd assembled around them. So that was our model. It was franchise-like, but we're buying out the older vets and then working out how to bring the younger vets through in the model.
Why is it that business owners in general, and dentists are no exception here, why is it that business owners either get stuck or trapped in their business and don't have that time, or even if they're not stuck or trapped in their business, they still don't make the time?
Well, there's a variety of different reasons. And I think one is because it's habitual. It's been a habit. And, when we first get going in the business, we've just bought the practice or we've started a new practice, whatever the case is, we're all firing on all cylinders. And this is the normal startup phase. Like, this is normal. Doesn't matter whether you're a dentist or a retailer. I own some shoe stores, like different businesses. We all have this startup phase, and the startup phase is full on, unless you have really deep pockets and you can afford to pay whoever you need to pay. It's full on, and so you're the one doing it. Well, that could happen for 1, 2, 3, 5 years. It's like we get into this habit of just, we're answering all the calls. We're answering all the, we're dealing with all the decisions. We're all this kind of stuff. But you don't need to do that after you kind of break through the startup mode. And this is where we kind of get into one of my formats, which I call the 5 Ps. And in setting this sort of thing up in alignment so that you're not making every small decision. I got this saying that I like to use. Decisions should be made at the lowest possible level of any organization.
Yeah.
This is the thing. If you're being dragged into low-level decisions as the business owner, as the practitioner, as the dentist, for most of us, the listeners are dentists, then you've got some work to do around this other stuff, because your time is more valuable than the lowest level decisions in your organization.
100%. And it's really interesting. I think you spoke about habits as well, and how we kind of get into the habit of being the guy or the girl that's the answer person and doing all these things. So you mentioned the 5 Ps, and we had a brief conversation about the 5 Ps off air, and I thought it would be really useful for our audience to kind of dive into those 5 Ps and explore them and explain them and really apply them to dental practice, because dental practice is just, it's a business. It's like any other service-based business.
It's service.
And so, I thought perhaps we could start off with the 5 Ps and run off with the first one, which is promise, right?
Yeah, it's the promise. And, it's where everything begins, because when there's no clarity, there's great words, right? There's A words, there's C words, there's P words in business. Yeah. And I usually wrap them around, but, clarity is so important. And the clarity of your promise is how you communicate to not only to your team, but to your clients and to anybody else involved in your sphere of influence. So it all starts with the promise. And what is your promise? And for most dentists, it's pretty straightforward. It's like, what's the problem? How do we uniquely solve it so that my client can have a better life? And this is the piece that a lot of people miss. It's like, okay, well, yeah, we clean teeth and we fix teeth and we do dentures and we do braces and all the different things that are in dental practice. But at the same time, what's missed, in particular in the marketing a lot of times, is the so that piece. And people feel the need, okay, in fact, I have a dental appointment next Tuesday for my regular cleaning, right? Yep. And I got my tag this morning that says, fill out your COVID form and do this and this, and we'll see you on Tuesday. Yep. So, but at the same time, it's like, okay, well, it's a service. I'm just going in and it's blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, I've never got anything from my dentist that says, you know what? because we're doing all this work for you, you're not going to experience these things, and you are going to experience a better life, And so the promise really is tagged around this idea, understanding what the problem that your client is going through.
Yeah.
What are your unique set of solutions that is different than anyone else, or at least different than the people you're up against locally?
Mm-hmm.
And like, what does that look like? Do you have a different experience? Do you have a different, system? Do you have different processes? Are you a new wave dentist? Are you an old school dentist? Like, what's different? And how does it make their life better when they spend their $300 or $500 or $2,000 or $7,000 for a new pair of dentures, whatever the case is, right?
So I really want to hone in on this, because the promise sounds like a really foundational piece, if I've understood it correctly. And
everything based on it.
Yeah. And so there's elements of marketing to this, but it's going to flow into delivery. It's going to flow into everything else, people and processes and the other things that we'll come to in a moment. But I want to hone in on that part, because you emphasize that, and clearly it's a piece that often is missed. Yeah. And I wanted to ask you how you create that so that, is there some thinking that goes into the so that? Is there, what's your experience when people come to you? Because I know you work with people to help them craft their promise.
Sure.
What's the art and the science of crafting the promise?
It's language. We could do another whole podcast on that.
Yeah. Words are some of my favorite things. I'm going to tell you, I'm a word nerd.
I love crafting stuff like that. And so I'll flip it back just for fun. I'll flip it back to my retail stores.
Sure.
And, I've got my promise down to 9 letters.
Oh, wow.
At our Shootopia stores here in Canada. And those 9 letters are ooh, ah, and aha.
Ah.
So what do we deliver to our clients? We deliver ooh. And what does ooh mean? Ooh means when I look in the mirror with my new pair of shoes on, I'm like looking in the mirror and going, ooh, I look pretty good.
Yeah.
So that's the feel good.
Yep.
We want to deliver feel good, right?
Yep.
I look good and I feel good. That's the look good. The next part is the feel good. And when you're standing there, same pair of shoes in front of the mirror, you're closing your eyes now and you're going, these feel fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay. We've delivered the look good. We've delivered the feel good.
Yep.
And on our wall, it says, what do we do at Shootopia? We help you look good and feel fantastic, right?
Yep.
So if we're delivering it through ooh and ah, so when we're literally working with clients, and they're looking in the mirror, it's like, how do you feel? And they'll be like, these feel great. And it's like, oh, we delivered.
Yeah.
We deliver our promise. So we pepper in some of these things just in the sales process or in the marketing occasionally as well. And then the last 3 letters were aha. And aha is, I finally found the perfect pair of shoes that makes me look good and feel fantastic, because usually I feel the ones that look good don't feel so great. And the ones that feel great don't look so good.
Yep.
So, we've created this. And so what we want them to do is feel this sort of feeling that when they pay us our money, right? It's $200 for that pair of shoes.
Yep.
So, and they're walking out the door and they're looking back at the Shootopia sign and they're saying, Shootopia, they're my favorite shoe store. I'm coming back here next time I need a pair of shoes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Delivered the promise, right?
Yep.
And so that's the kind of thing that we want to do when we're thinking about the promise, is how do we deliver that in the language and in the process, right? Which is down the product itself, which is P number 2, the process. How are we actually delivering that? And I talked a little bit about, we'll actually ask them when they're standing in front of the mirror, how do they feel and how do they look, so that we can, and if they aren't feeling fantastic, it's like, let's get something else. Let's work until you are.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And so these different things, and then how, how's the end game played? Like, they've paid their money. Remember, everybody pays their money and they're happy paying their money if they see a better life.
Yeah.
Not so happy if they don't.
I'm curious to ask you, just to go back in time, when Marissa, the CEO that you brought into the agency, when you and she sat down with the project of reversing you out of the business, because I know that there's a lot of dentists listening to this podcast going, hey, reverse me out of my business. And I think a lot of them want to be reversed out to some extent. Some want to be reversed out totally. Some enjoy the clinical work. Some don't enjoy the clinical work. Some just want to have the right blend of things. So what I'd really like to touch on for a moment is those initial conversations you had with Marissa. What were those? We'll obviously dig into the process of systemizing the business in a moment, but what was that initial consultation or conversation like with her around that?
We both agreed, because I'd been stuck in the agency for over 10 years and I was working in the operations, and we both agreed that that's the piece that needed to change. I mean, that was the big reason for getting her. Then we started to think about, well, where am I involved? And I started giving pieces to her, whether it was the sales process, onboarding of clients, integrating with the back end of the team, starting for the team to get comfortable with her work and feel confident. And there were a lot of challenges. Like I remember one time, so she brought in a lot of the operational stuff, and a great book to read is Rocket Fuel by Gino Wickman. And he talks about the two types of personalities. You've got the visionary and then you've got the integrator. The visionary is the big picture person thinker, and then the integrator is the detail orientated manager who follows things through to completion. And I mean, Michael Gerber talks about it as well. He talks about it in the leader versus the manager. Now, I was the leader and I wasn't necessarily the great with follow through, and I can be even though I'm, big picture thinking, I have an appreciation of systems. I'm not a lover of systems. Like I don't like writing out detailed process. I love the output and the benefit that comes from having a systemized business. So when I recognized that, and we realized that I could still own a systemized business and not be a systems person who creates the systems, that for me was a huge light bulb. And then I started to put Marissa in charge. And there were situations where for a little while there as the business owner, I started feeling like I could throw my weight around. And as the business owner, I would go to a team member and I'd say, oh, I've got this presentation I'm giving on Friday. I've got to get this slide deck done. I'd go to the graphics person and I'd say, I need you to escalate this and put it at the top of the list. And that would throw out their workload. They'd miss due dates for clients. Marissa would get really frustrated. And then she came back to me 2 or 3 times and kept on nudging me back and said, we can't do this. We have a way of doing things in the way that we allocate work to manage workloads and make sure we hit our deadlines. And then it got to a point where I did it one too many times. And then I built up such a relationship with her that she went to Asana, which is our project management platform, wrote a memo for the entire team and tagged the entire team in it and basically said, next time Dave comes to you with an urgent task that must be done and it hasn't gone through the appropriate process, I want you to ignore his message. Now, that was like incredibly gutsy from a manager to tell the business owner that is unacceptable and we have a way of doing things. And once she did that, things just started to click. I kind of let go of the ego and then realized if I wanted to step out, I needed someone to step in to take over that piece. And if I kept on undermining that, I would forever be pulled back into that moment. So it was a matter of building her up and then going, great. Okay, well, you're running this now and I'll take a back seat. And we got to the point where the agency was running so smoothly that I'd check in with her as a business owner about once a quarter. We'd look at all of the financials. We'd have a full day and we'd dig into everything and we'd readjust our 90-day rocks and think about the targets and review the dashboards. And then I would take my profit distribution as an owner every quarter. And I had no plans to ever sell that business. It got to the point where I was just like, yeah, look, this is a fantastic little side business. It gave me enough freedom to start up the next side hustle and all those sorts of things. And then the big change happened. She had to fly back to the States for some family reasons. Like, she was based in Australia, but had family in the US. And when she came back, she resigned. Oh, wow. And she'd been in the CEO position for 3 months. And I just remember at the time, my gut just dropped. I was like, oh, I don't even know how I'm going to be able to find her replacement. And I had started up the side hustle, and my passion for that business had died. And, because I'm focusing on the system side of things, and I thought, okay, well, maybe I'll sell it. And then I had the next moment when I realized the value of the systems. I built a business that someone actually wanted to buy. I got the news late in the year, like I think it was early November, either that or October. And I'd found a buyer before the end of the year. Wow. And we did handover, and they did basically a few times earnings. And when I discussed with him why he purchased it, he said 2 reasons: financial performance and the systems. Yeah. The business has been running without you for 3 years, and I know it's now not built on you. And again, it was another big sort of, wow, unless you have that in place, you don't really have a business of value. And if I didn't have systems and Marissa had left, I don't know what I would have done. I mean, the business would have probably closed.
Hey there, I really hope you enjoyed that episode from the summer series. I hope you took some great notes, but most importantly, I hope you apply what you learned as a result of listening to the guests on the show. Now, if you want to set up your next 12 months to be the most successful ever, then I'm going to encourage you to think about putting a strategic plan in place. No matter what your definition of success is, it's going to be important that you have a plan. So whether you want to increase your revenue, whether you want to enhance your profitability, whether you want to have more free time for better work-life balance, maybe you want to have fuller appointment books with better marketing, or maybe it's about having your team perform at a higher level than ever before so that your experiences for your patients are better, you're able to delegate more effectively. Whatever it is for you, having the right plan in place is going to be really critical. One of the things that we know at Savvy is that the stages of growth of a business are absolutely predictable. And what that means is that the challenges encountered at any particular level of growth are really predictable, as are the solutions. We've worked with literally hundreds, if not thousands of practices over the years, and we've been able to help them achieve their business goals, their personal goals, and everything in between. But it all starts with having the right plan in place. One of the skills that we've developed is the ability to identify very clearly what the right next thing is to focus on. And so as you embark on the next 12 months, it's going to be really important that you identify what the right next thing is for you. Yeah, and that's going to depend on where you are now and what your goals and ambitions are as well. And once you've identified what the right next thing or things are, it's important to identify, well, what are the potential obstacles? What are the things that could derail us? And then, of course, have a mitigation plan around that so that as you progress through the year, you can make that progress, hit those goals, achieve the milestones that are important to you. And as I said, make sure that this 12 months is the most successful ever. Now, if you would like a hand putting that plan together, could I encourage you to book a practice growth call with one of our team? All you need to do is head across to savvydentist.com/growth call. One of our team will reach out to you and book that time. Now, during that call, they're going to be asking you some questions about what's the current state of play in your practice, what your goals and ambitions are for the next 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, and so on, so that they can align your thinking, align your resources to achieving not just the 1 year goals, but the 3 year, the 5 year, and the 10 year goals as well, so that you're setting yourself up for a fantastic future. As I said, whether it's around revenue growth, profit growth, leverage for greater free time, whatever it might be for you, that's really, really important, because ultimately what we want to create is a practice and a life that you love. And getting that right plan in place is a really critical and essential first step for that. So all you need to do is head across to savvydentist.com/growth call and book that time. And we look forward to talking to you very, very shortly. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to the Savvy Dentist podcast. For more episodes, go to drjessiegreen.com/savvydentist. And to discover how to build a high-performance dental practice, visit drjessiegreen.com and download the free report.